Mia had never been afraid of the dark, until the dreams began. It started subtly at first, vague images of trees and misty shapes that slipped away when she reached out. But soon, the nightmare took hold of her nights with ruthless clarity. Every evening, as she closed her eyes, the same dream unfolded, a dense forest swallowed by a suffocating fog. The air was thick and cold, biting through her pajamas like icy fingers. No matter which way she walked, the forest never ended. The trees towered like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches stretching toward a heavy, starless sky. The ground beneath her feet was soft, sometimes wet, making every step a struggle. Twigs snapped loudly in the eerie silence, but no animal stirred. A heavy stillness pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Then, from the edge of the fog, she saw it, a figure. It never fully emerged, always lurking just beyond the tree line. No eyes, no face, just a formless shadow that seemed to absorb the dim light around it. Its presence was a void, cold and hungry. Each time Mia tried to run, the path behind her twisted impossibly, folding back on itself like a cruel maze. She would find herself right back where the shadow stood, closer, more ominous. The figure whispered her name, a voice like shards of glass scraping against stone, echoing in the stillness. Mia's legs trembled, but she was rooted in place, trapped between fear and fascination. Time warped in the dream, seconds stretched into eternity. The shadow didn't move, but its oppressive presence suffocated her, as if it were pulling her deeper into the darkness. Waking was no relief. She would jerk awake, soaked in cold sweat, heart racing like a trapped animal. The room was always silent, but sometimes Mia swore she caught a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Days turned into weeks. Her energy drained, her eyes darkened with sleepless nights. Friends asked if she was okay. Mia only nodded, hiding the gnawing dread growing inside her. One morning, after a particularly harrowing night, Mia found something strange, a small black feather resting on her pillow. It was smooth and cold, its edges unnaturally sharp. She had no pets, no idea where it came from. That night, as she lay down, the whisper came again, clearer, more insistent. "You can't run forever." Mia's breath caught. The nightmare was no longer confined to sleep. Something was reaching through, and it was coming for her. It began one evening while she was alone in her apartment. The dim light of dusk filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows that danced with the fading sun. She sat at her desk, trying to focus on a book, but the creeping sense of unease was impossible to shake. Then she saw it. A dark silhouette standing just beyond the window, barely visible behind the translucent curtain. It wasn't a person, no defined features, just a shifting, amorphous shadow that seemed to pulse with cold energy. Mia's heart hammered. She blinked, and the figure was gone. At first she thought it was a trick of the light or her imagination, but over the following days the shadow appeared more frequently, lurking in corners, at the edge of mirrors, reflected in windows when nothing should be there. One night, as she prepared to sleep, the shadow emerged fully inside the room. It didn't speak or move like a living creature. It simply stood, a black void where light refused to penetrate. Mia felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. It was an overwhelming presence, a silent scream that pressed on her mind. She tried to flee, but the figure followed relentlessly, never blinking, never fading. Sometimes it mimicked her movements in distorted ways, as if mocking her existence. Desperation led Mia to research. She scoured forums, old books, anything about shadows and hauntings. She found a chilling pattern. Shadows that fed on fear, feeding on dreams to cross into the waking world. Her own dreams, the recurring nightmare, were a beacon, a bridge. Mia's waking life blurred into her nightmares. She started losing time, forgetting moments, waking in places she didn't remember going. She confided in a close friend, but when the friend glanced into a mirror behind Mia, their face went pale. "The shadow's here," they whispered. As the nights wore on, the shadow's grip tightened. It whispered secrets and voices not its own, showing glimpses of things Mia dared not remember. A voice from the darkness told her, "You invited me. Now you belong to me." Mia was terrified, but also fascinated, trapped in a struggle for her own soul. The shadow wasn't just haunting her, it was waiting. Mia's nights and days had begun to blur together, as if she were living in a half-remembered nightmare. The shadow figure that haunted her dreams had crossed into reality, whispering dark promises she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Yet, as her terror grew, so did a gnawing sense that the root of it all lay buried deep within her own past. A past she had locked away for years, sealed behind a fragile wall of forgotten memories. It was an unremarkable Tuesday when the floodgates finally opened. Her phone rang just as the autumn sun slanted through the cracked blinds, casting long golden fingers across the floor. The voice on the other end was her mother's, soft, cautious, and unfamiliar after months of silence. "I found some old things in the attic," her mother said, voice trembling with something unspoken. "Things I thought were lost." Mia's heart clenched. Memories she hadn't touched in years whispered to the surface. Childhood laughter mingled with distant, fractured screams. Her mother spoke carefully, recounting a night Mia barely remembered. A night when the house had burned. Flames had devoured the family home, swallowing rooms, memories, and a part of Mia's childhood that had never quite healed. Her father had disappeared that night. Officially declared missing, presumed dead, but no body was ever found. The revelation shattered the brittle calm Mia had tried to maintain. She felt the walls closing in, her mind a chaotic storm of emotion and images long repressed. In the days that followed, Mia unearthed more pieces of the past. Old photographs revealed a younger version of herself, innocent and laughing, untouched by fear. But beneath the dust of forgotten boxes, she found something else. A charred silver locket, half melted and cold to the touch. She didn't remember owning it. She didn't remember the secrets it held. Each night, her dreams grew more vivid. Flames licked at her skin, smoke clawed at her lungs, and always, the shadow stood silently, watching as her childhood home burned around her. The shadow wasn't just a specter. It was the embodiment of Mia's deepest fears. Fear of loss, abandonment, and the unknown horrors her mind had hidden away to protect her. Seeking answers, Mia began therapy with Dr. Harris, hoping to piece together the fragments of her fractured past. Sessions peeled back layers of repression. She recalled moments of terror, confusion, and loneliness. Yet each breakthrough seemed to feed the darkness stalking her, both in dreams and waking life. One night, during a particularly intense session, Mia blacked out, collapsing beneath the weight of memories too heavy to bear. When she awoke, the room was cold, unnaturally cold, and the whispering voice she'd come to dread echoed clearly in her ears. "You cannot hide forever." That voice, once distant, was now a suffocating presence, reminding her that the trauma wasn't just a memory, it was a gateway. The shadow waiting on the other side was ancient and malevolent. It thrived on her pain, her fear, and her silence. Mia realized with a sickening clarity that the past was not done with her. It was reaching through time and space, dragging her back into a nightmare she had tried desperately to forget, and this time, she might not escape. Mia had always thought she was an ordinary girl, like anyone else, growing up in a quiet suburban town. But deep within her mind, there was a vault, tightly locked, concealing memories she had long forgotten. Memories too painful to face, memories her mind had buried to protect her fragile innocence. For years, she lived without knowing the truth of that night, the night the house burned. The night her father disappeared. It started slowly, subtle things, fragments of sensation and fleeting images at the edges of her vision. The scent of smoke when no fire was near. A faint heat that prickled her skin like invisible flames. And always the cold eyes of a shadow watching from the darkness. Then her mother's call shattered the fragile barrier of denial. "I found something," her mother said softly. "Something from the attic, from the old house." That call reopened the floodgates. The memories surged in a relentless torrent. Mia saw her childhood home, the red brick house with white shutters, the swing set in the yard. But then the smoke came. Thick, choking, burning. Flames licked the walls, devouring everything. She saw her mother screaming, frantic and desperate, calling her name through the inferno. But the shadows moved differently, silent, watching, untouched by the fire. Her father? She couldn't remember much. Only that he was gone afterward, vanished without a trace. No funeral, no answers. With trembling hands, Mia dug through boxes stored in her attic, unearthing old photographs yellowed with age. Faces smiled back, her parents, happy and whole. But in one faded picture, a dark figure stood just behind her father's shoulder, a silhouette too black, too out of place to be ignored. Then came the locket. She found it hidden beneath the floorboards during renovations years ago, but had never opened it. Now, the charred silver gleamed faintly in her hand. Inside, a tiny folded note with words in a script she couldn't decipher. Her dreams began to shift, becoming more vivid, more terrifying. She relived the fire again and again, each time with greater clarity. Flames crackled and smoked, screams echoed. And always the shadow lingered, motionless, faceless, eyes like dark voids that sucked in every spark of light. Determined to confront her past, Mia sought help from Dr. Harris, a specialist in trauma therapy. Each session peeled back layers of repression, revealing more of the forgotten horrors. She remembered the suffocating heat, the feeling of being trapped, the smell of burning wood mixed with something foul and ancient. But as the memories surfaced, so did the darkness. One night, after a particularly exhausting session, Mia blacked out. When she awoke, she was drenched in sweat, the room icy cold. The whisper filled her ears, "You cannot hide forever." The voice was no longer just a nightmare. It was a presence that stalked her waking moments. Her therapist warned her about the dangers of pushing too hard, but Mia knew this was no ordinary trauma. It was a gateway. The shadow that haunted her dreams was a malevolent force feeding on her pain and fear. It was ancient, tied to her family's dark past in ways she couldn't yet understand. Each step she took to uncover the truth seemed to pull her deeper into its grasp. Mia felt the darkness closing in, suffocating and relentless. The past she'd buried was alive, and it wanted her. And now, there was no turning back. After days of sleepless nights and haunted memories, Mia's search for answers led her to an unexpected discovery. While sorting through a dusty box in her late grandmother's attic, Mia uncovered an ancient leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked and faded, the pages yellowed with age. The faint scent of mothballs and old paper filled the air as she carefully opened it. The handwriting inside was elegant but hurried, filled with frantic notes, sketches of strange symbols and cryptic warnings. As Mia read, the journal revealed the story of her great-grandmother, Eleanor, a woman shrouded in mystery and whispered secrets. Eleanor had lived in the same house that later burned down. The journal described how she was tormented by a shadowy presence she called the Watcher, a dark entity that haunted the family for generations. The entries detailed strange occurrences. Whispered voices in the dead of night, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of dread that seeped into every corner of the home. One entry, dated just days before the fire, sent chills down Mia's spine. The darkness grows stronger. I fear for the children. The shadow waits in the corners, patient and cold. If it finds them, it will never let go. I must protect them, even if it costs me everything. Mia's hands trembled as she flipped through more pages, discovering instructions scrawled in the margins, rituals and symbols meant to ward off the presence. But the final pages were smeared with dark stains, the words barely legible. The last sentence was chilling and incomplete. It's here. It's waiting. We cannot escape the shadow's grasp. Pray it spares us. The journal connected the dots Mia had struggled with. The family's history, the fire, the disappearance of her father. The shadow wasn't just a figment of her mind. It was an ancient curse, bound to her bloodline, passed down like a dark inheritance. With this knowledge, Mia felt a mix of fear and determination. She wasn't just fighting a nightmare, she was fighting a legacy. As the sun set outside, shadows lengthened in the room. Mia closed the journal and looked into the mirror. For a moment, the reflection smiled back, a twisted, dark grin that wasn't hers. The fight was far from over. After the chilling revelations from the old journal, Mia's world grew darker in ways she hadn't anticipated. The past was clawing its way into the present, but she wasn't alone in feeling its cold grip. Across the street from Mia's apartment lived an elderly man named Mr. Crawford. He was a quiet, solitary figure, always dressed in a faded gray coat, tending to a small garden of withered plants and cracked statues. There was something peculiar about him. Mia had noticed his piercing eyes that seemed to watch the world not with curiosity, but with deep, haunted knowledge. Mr. D. Crawford was the kind of neighbor you'd see in passing, nod politely to, but never truly know. Yet after Mia's nightmares worsened and shadows began to seep beyond her dreams, she found herself drawn to him. One late autumn evening, wrapped in a thick scarf, Mia approached his porch. The house creaked with age, its windows dimly lit by flickering candlelight. "Mr. Crawford?" Mia called softly. The old man appeared in the doorway, his face pale and lined with years of worry. "You've been having trouble sleeping," he said, voice raspy but steady. Mia nodded, surprised. "How did you?" He smiled faintly. "I know the shadow. I've seen it before." Over the following weeks, they met often. Mr. Crawford told her stories of the neighborhood's dark past, how decades ago children disappeared without explanation, how entire families were uprooted by fear and sorrow. He spoke of curses passed down like poison, of shadows that fed on grief and secrets. But the most disturbing part was his warning: you can't fight it alone. The shadow chooses its prey carefully, and once it's fixed on you, the world changes. People disappear. Faces you trust vanish. That's its way of cutting the thread between you and reality. One night, after an especially terrifying encounter with the shadow in her apartment, when the lights flickered violently and the cold grip of despair nearly crushed her, Mia sought out Mr. Crawford. She found his porch empty, the door ajar. Inside, the house was in disarray. Papers scattered, the small garden trampled. Neighbors whispered later that they hadn't seen Mr. Crawford since. The police found no evidence, no clues, only an old photograph of Mr. Crawford and a group of people, all with dark shadows lurking behind them. Mia was left with a sinking feeling. The shadow was claiming more than just dreams. It was consuming the living. And if she didn't act soon, she might be next. After losing contact with Mr. Crawford, Mia's grip on reality continued to unravel. The shadow's presence grew bolder, no longer confined to fleeting glimpses in corners or the edges of her vision. It had begun to manifest in the very fabric of her home, and the mirrors were its gateways. It started subtly. One evening, as Mia prepared for bed, she caught a flicker in the full-length mirror standing in her hallway. For a split second, the reflection didn't match her movements. Her hand lifted, but in the glass, her reflection's hand stayed still. A cold chill traveled down her spine. She shook her head, convincing herself it was fatigue playing tricks on her. But over the following nights, the distortions worsened. The mirrors across her apartment became windows into something else. A twisted, dark world where shadows moved independently and faces smiled back with cruel, knowing grins. One morning, Mia awoke to find faint fingerprints smeared across the glass of the bathroom mirror. They were too high for her to have reached and too small to be anyone else's. When she wiped them away, new smudges appeared the next day. The most terrifying moment came late one night. Mia had been jolted awake by the faint sound of whispers. She stumbled into the hallway, eyes darting toward the mirror. The glass rippled like water, and out of the darkness stepped a figure. Her own reflection, but distorted, twisted, eyes sunken and lips curling into a sinister grin. It mouthed words without sound. "Come with me." Paralyzed with fear, Mia watched as the reflection's hand reached out, pressing against the inside of the glass as if trying to break free. Desperate, Mia smashed the mirror with a heavy lamp. The glass shattered in a shower of shards, but the coldness remained. The whispers lingered, echoing softly in her mind. Mirrors were supposed to reflect reality, but now Mia knew they were portals, traps for the soul. Days later, she discovered old newspaper clippings hidden in the back of a drawer. Stories of previous tenants who disappeared without a trace, their last known locations often near mirrors. Mia realized she was not the first to be hunted. The mirror's reflection was not her own. It was something else, waiting. After the horrifying encounter with the mirror, Mia's nights became a waking nightmare. The darkness was no longer silent or still. It was alive with whispers. Low, guttural murmurs that slithered through the shadows, creeping into her ears and seeping into her soul. At first, the whispers were faint, barely audible over the creaks of the old building and the hum of the city outside. But each night, they grew louder, more insistent. Words formed, twisted and half understood. Names, warnings, pleas for help. Fragments of conversations from beyond. Mia's bedroom became a prison of sound. The whispers came from every direction. The walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. They called her name, begged her to listen. They spoke of things no living person should know. One night, as the clock struck 3:03 a.m., the whispers turned to voices, clear, chilling, and desperate. Maya lay frozen beneath her blankets as the room filled with an unbearable cold. The voices told stories of despair, of souls trapped between worlds, and of an ancient darkness that fed on fear and forgotten pain. Through the haze of terror, Mia recognized a voice, soft and broken, calling for her father by name. The voice urged her to remember, to find the truth buried in the past. It warned of the shadow's hunger, its endless patience, and its plan to claim her soul. Unable to bear the torment, Mia tried to block the whispers. Earplugs, white noise, prayers, but nothing worked. The voices seeped through the walls, through the very fabric of reality. Sleep became a battleground. Each night she fought to hold on to sanity, but the whispers grew stronger, pulling her toward an abyss she could not see. Desperation drove Mia to record the voices one night with her phone. When she played back the audio, distorted words filled the room, a mixture of pleas, curses, and a chilling promise. "You belong to us now." The revelation shattered her last defenses. Mia understood then, the whispers were more than voices. They were warnings from trapped souls, others who had faced the shadow and lost. Her fight was no longer just for survival. It was for salvation. The darkness was patient, but Mia was running out of time. For weeks, Mia had struggled to separate her dreams from reality, but the boundary was dissolving fast. The horrors she once faced only behind closed eyelids were now creeping into her waking life, invading every moment with an unbearable weight. It began subtly. Small things at first. A sudden chill when she entered a room, fleeting shadows slipping just beyond her vision. Objects moved slightly from where she left them, as if touched by unseen fingers. Then came the dreams, vivid, relentless, impossible to escape. In them, Mia wandered the endless foggy forest, haunted by the shadow that had plagued her since childhood. But now the dreamscape was bleeding into her days. A leaf she found crushed beneath her shoe bore the same blackened edges as those she saw in the nightmare. The scent of smoke followed her through her apartment, even though the air was clean. One afternoon, Mia found herself standing outside the burned ruins of her childhood home. Not the one that stood now, but the scorched skeleton left by the fire. The sky was a deep, unnatural gray, and the air hung thick with ash. As she stepped inside, the shadows moved with a life of their own, whispering secrets she couldn't quite grasp. Suddenly, the shadow emerged, not distant this time, but close, palpable, suffocating. It whispered promises and threats, revealing twisted fragments of the past, her father's disappearance, the curse that gripped her family, and the fate that awaited her if she could not break free. Mia woke up gasping, the echo of its voice ringing in her ears. "You cannot escape me." Worse still, the line between dream and reality began to blur. Mia noticed bruises on her arms she couldn't explain, and scratches appeared overnight on her bedroom walls, marks that matched those in her nightmares. Even her friends noticed her slipping away, eyes hollow, skin pale. Her world was unraveling. In one terrifying episode, Mia fell asleep during a party, only to awake in the hospital hours later with no memory of how she got there. Her phone had dozens of strange photos, dark figures, cryptic symbols, and shadowy places she had never seen. She knew then, the nightmare wasn't confined to her mind. It had crossed over into her reality. And the shadow was growing stronger. The battle wasn't just in her dreams anymore. It was everywhere. The more Mia uncovered about the shadow's hold on her life, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary haunting. It was tied to ancient forces, dark rituals whispered through generations, binding her family to a curse older than time. Her discovery of the old journal had been only the beginning. Hidden within its fragile pages were cryptic symbols and diagrams, arcane signs that pulsed with a sinister energy. They hinted at a ritual meant to either imprison or unleash the shadow. Determined to understand, Mia sought out experts in folklore and occult history. She visited dusty libraries and obscure bookstores, poring over tomes filled with faded ink and